when I think about developer platforms, I think about like all of the things that takes to develop and delivers the final products to the customers. So our customers are actually the developers themselves. So that's how we want to think about it. What that entail is like when we solve a problem from an engineering standpoint, sure, it's simple. It's just like developing a solution for something and solved it. But like that, how you solve this on a scale, how you deliver this in a cohesive experience. It's not about like, I love Kubernetes. I build a lot on Kubernetes. But it's not about like how you just give someone Kubernetes cluster. It's like how you give them a Kubernetes cluster that works with CI/CD. But what does that mean when like we have scaling problems? What does that mean like on a cost perspective? What does that actually means like what all of that entails when it comes to developer productivity and making sure like all of the pipelines are green?
This podcast is hosted by Cortex.io. We help organizations continuously improve their operational maturity and reduce developer friction so that the whole organization operates as one. Check out the link in the description to see how we've helped our customers cut their MTTR in half, double their deploy frequency, and save thousands of engineering hours with golden paths and the right guardrails. Thanks for listening to Brain Trust, a podcast for engineering leaders by engineering leaders. Hi, welcome to the Brain Trust podcast. I'm Ganesh, I'm one of the co-founders and CTO at Cortex. Cortex is an engineering operations platform helping organizations improve their operational maturity and reduce developer friction. Today with me, I have Sneha and Ahmed from the New York Times. Very excited to have them on. Sneha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, thank you. This is a very cool experience. Love the studio. So my name is Sneha Rao. I am the VP of product of a team called Developer Platforms at the New York Times. And it's actually a very cool department. I like the name. I like what it stands for. And it's pretty self-evident. We care deeply about our developers, their experiences, and enabling them in whatever ways make sense. So some examples of that are ensuring that we know how to serve the news, and that we can break news in an effective way, and that we run in efficient ways on the cloud. So we care deeply about FinOps, and that we have the right backend ecosystem and infrastructure to scale in an elastic way. So yes, I'm talking about Kubernetes, and yes, I'm talking about runtime environments, but it's more than that, right? Like it's what makes sense for the business. And in addition to that, like how do our users even come to those platforms, like, the iOS native experience, the Android native experience, the web experience, all of those components and all of those platforms is essentially what makes developer platforms pretty awesome.
Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, and this is a great intro. So my name is Ahmed Bebars. I'm a principal engineer at Developer Platforms, work closely with Sneha. And then when I started at the Times, I just wanted to start as an engineer, and like I joined in customer care, solving problems for some customers. And now like it feels different because I'm not solving problems for customers directly, but I'm solving problems for developers who are trying to solve problems for customers or build a product for customers. So the main focus is like build tooling, provide platforms, like have all of the things that like we are focused on. And we know that we build best practices around just centralized and mature to people. So focus more on operations, focus more on all of that heavy lifting for things so we can let team innovate and building like cooking or games or like then delivers the news, like all of that. We're trying to like make more focus into like how we can do this more effectively and in a way that can scale.
I love that. I'm very excited for today's episode because it's the first time we're having two guests on this podcast, but specifically a product leader and an engineering leader. So trying to cover all of our bases here. I would love to kind of start by talking about what developer platform means, because in your introduction, you covered a couple of different things which maybe people don't realize are part of platform. Like you didn't just talk about developer experience. You talked about FinOps and like breaking the news. And like those are things that maybe you don't realize are part of a developer platform. So like what exactly does it mean to build a developer platform? Like what is the scope of everything if you could describe your function in the organization?
Yeah. Do you want to go first?
Sure,
Yeah.
I can try. So when I think about developer platforms, I think about like all of the things that takes to develop and delivers the final products to the customers. So our customers are actually the developers themselves. So that's how we want to think about it. What that entail is like, we have to think about like, this is part of like an interesting process because I was just talking to Sneha about this. Like when we solve a problem from an engineering standpoint, sure, it's simple. It's just like developing a solution for something and solved it. But like that, how you solve this on a scale, how you deliver this in a cohesive experience. It's not about like, I love Kubernetes. I build a lot on Kubernetes. But it's not about like how you just give someone Kubernetes cluster. It's like how you give them a Kubernetes cluster that works with CI/CD. But what does that mean when like we have scaling problems? What does that mean like on a cost perspective? What does that actually mean like what all of that entails when it comes to developer productivity and making sure like all of the pipelines are green? So they have their own mechanism of like understanding what is their system is doing. But all of these processes, when you think about when I'm in my own team, if I'm building all of that myself, the ways that I start a product, code is one part, but like the problem is even comes before that. So the ways that we look at the journey is like, and we have done many conversation on this, it's like you start from an idea and then you go to a plan and then you go to a story, like you developed already your project plan. And then you come to a process where like it's a code, it's like deployment, it's like the CI, it's like the catalog, it's monitoring, it's all of that kind of stuff. This is what we shape. This is what we try to shape. We try to take the journey itself and see the commonality between like all of our customers and delivers that experience holistically in a way. So like what you come in, you like, it's not like, hey, as a mission, you come to us and say, I just want to deploy something, or like I want to create a new service. You get the full experience of like from like how to where you start, where's a couple clicks when you template something until like you get a monitoring and observability on it. But you also want to get the cost, you want to get all of that cycle of it. And this is how you deliver like a full mature product. It's not just about like, sure, take Kubernetes cluster and play around with it. Yeah, that's good when you deal with an infrastructure team. That's an ops kind of situation. It's not like a platform. The other part into it is the patterns that we observe as well, because it's not just like, hey, take this and do whatever you want with it. It's like we try to develop patterns and best practices and like how actually you engage with the product. Like if we see something that is a platform way, we implement that by default to be the only way you can go it. Sometimes you want to have that leeway and customization that like your customers can like do their own configuration, not everything, like not everything fits all. Yeah. So that's where we try to do. That's my perspective from like how it evolved over the years into the platform.
I love that because you don't talk about, like you said, individual capabilities, but it's the entire pattern of experience. And specifically, you talked about things like monitoring and alerting and like the reliability practices, like all of that part of the journey. And I think the commonality in what both of you described is there's a focus on kind of the end user, like your customer is a developer, but your developer's customer is like the New York Times customer. And so like finding patterns of what your developers are trying to deliver for the end user and trying to build that into the platform is kind of your charter. Is that a safe, is that the right way of describing it? Or?
Yes, and
yeah.
They are the customers,
yeah.
but the stakeholders are the business units. So let's just expand on that. So the New York Times has multiple subsidiaries, right? We have games, we have cooking, we have shopping experiences for Wirecutter reviews, and we have The Athletic, which is for sports. Each of these business units have big ambitions, and they're trying to scale in different ways, and they're building a whole new tier.
Yeah.
And those user journeys and those user experiences are being defined, and what we built for the news in the shared platform ecosystem needs to evolve to support these new subsidiaries. So the way I like to have conversations with these business unit, like we call them mission leaders, is essentially asking them like, what keeps you up at night? Like, what are you dreaming of? Like, what do you wish you could have built yesterday? And how do you intend to scale that? Like, what are your biggest concerns? And some might say it's deployment, and it's, like we just don't feel like we have the right velocity. Some might say it's experimentation, like we don't know how to go about that. And some might say like we're just worried we won't be able to scale to the audiences that we have the ambition for.
Yeah.
Whatever those problem statements are, there are so many patterns to support those. So everything that Ahmed said are like the blueprints that those strategies are built upon. But ultimately our job, as I see it, is like, yes, it's about satisfying the developer experience and making sure like they know how to do their jobs. Like every engineer that walks through the doors of New York Times knows how to onboard into our ecosystem, understands the systems that they need to work with, have these fine-grained blueprints of how to work with infrastructure, and it's really easy for them to like get in. but it's also what can you now do with that?
Yeah.
Like, okay, you've onboarded your engineers and they know how to do their jobs and they're really enjoying it, and that's great. Now, what are the business outcomes that we're trying to scale to? And that actually helps us innovate our own infrastructure.
Yeah.
So we then grow into new verticals. An example of that is video. We're going really big on news and video formats. So video observability is a no-brainer, but to be honest, we're catching up and we're learning as we're going. So there's so many of these capabilities that we keep expanding on as we go because we talk to those businesses. And that's really important. And I would say any team that isn't doing that, they're missing out.
I think one of the things that's very clear about the way you guys both describe this is there's a clear product mindset to the way you're doing things, right? Like you're talking about the user journeys and finding patterns. You're talking about stakeholders and making sure that you're aligning to that. I think that's very unique when it comes to platform organization. We've seen a lot of platform organizations where it turns into science experiments and you're building Kubernetes clusters like, hey, we have this cool YAML ops thing where you can spin up clusters and it solves nobody's problem. So I think it's very clear that you guys have built a product mindset around it. How did that start, and how do you guys go from business outcomes to platform outcomes? What does that process actually look like? You're talking to a mission leader, you hear something about we want to do video.
Yeah.
How does that come backwards to the platform or the other way around?
Yeah, great question. I think it's a craft that is perhaps we're just peeling the first layer of the onion on this craft. And when you find somebody who can empathize with a developer experience, perhaps potentially having been a developer, having been a software engineer, they can then connect with the nitty-gritties of what it would take to build those business challenges. So that's the sort of acumen that TPMs bring, and that's the kind of talent that I hire.
Yeah.
Going back to when we get a meaty problem, okay, we're trying to scale video to essentially every reader, every Reggie that's out there, our minds immediately go to problem solving. Yeah. And guess what? I'm an engineer too. I mean, I might have a product title, but it's a core principle. So you start sort of going to the whiteboard and sort of figuring out, all right, what is the scale that we're talking of?
Yeah.
What are the cost implications to serve those experiences? What are the drivers associated with it? Cost drivers associated with it? Do we care? Do we just want to grow in this vertical, test it before we start thinking about optimization, or do we want to do it in a cost-optimal way? And those constraints actually help us fine-tune the architectural design that we would support. So we do care about costs as we have to as we scale. So everything that we invest in video, yes, of course, we want the highest quality bandwidth and the 1080p resolution as this video would be. But it comes, is that necessary on every format that we have? Long form, short form, native ads, maybe not. We're not sure. We're figuring that out. And just supporting that thinking.
Yeah.
DevP is the partner supporting the newsroom as they sort of innovate and building out that video acumen. And guess what? It's not just the news. It's cooking. Now you're seeing our head chefs and our cooking experts kind of do reviews in the kitchen in video formats, and you have Wirecutter reviews in video formats, and obviously sports will be covered in video. And a lot of our ads are also native video ads, and they're performing really well. So this goes back to, you got to talk to every business unit as they sort of invent that and, have shared video player experiences. We're the central unit that can do that.
Yeah.
And there is no other team that's set up to do what we can. And we take a lot of pride in that, to be honest.
Yeah.
It brings us to the table. We're here to solve the big, meaty, complex problems. And a product manager is one who can scale their thinking to think beyond it's a pattern.
Yeah.
It's a shared pattern that goes across multiple teams, multiple full stack, back end, front end engineers. It goes across different business units. What are those personas? What are those segments? And how do we roll this out? And then how do you think about stability and scale and cost? And how do you think about the speed of execution because each of those have different infrastructure investments associated with it. Yeah, that's kind of like the job of a TPM in the space.
It sounds like there's maybe top down is not the right word, but there's like you're focusing on the why and the what before the how. And I think that's like, you see a lot of platform organizations start from the bottoms up of like, what technology do we want? And then how do we deliver it versus like, what do we want to deliver to our customers? And then how does a platform enable it?
Yeah.
I'm curious, like from the history of the platform organization, has there always been a platform mindset? Is it something that was new? Like how did that evolve over the years?
I can share my perspective, and
Yeah.
then Ahmed's been here longer, so he absolutely.
Yeah.
Or maybe we should start
Okay.
with like
Yeah.
the past, and then the.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. I think like solving it from just like a problem solving perspective, like, hey, I want to scale my Kubernetes cluster. Sure, yeah, here are 100 nodes, scale. Like you don't even ask that question. Like, like why do you actually want to scale? Like how you want to scale? Does that apply to someone else? So I think like it evolves from like being like, like the momentum of like ops, DevOps, platform engineering. Like I think that where the momentum was coming from, like where like you have teams that are responsible for like vending you something. Yeah. So like, I want an infrastructure. Sure, here you go. Like, I need 16x. Here, take it. Yeah. This is up to you. Then it evolves to like, you know what? It's not evolving. It's not like working the way that you expect, because like there's a gap between like, oh, and now I need to do something about it. Then like there's a miscommunication gap into it. Then it brings the concept of DevOps in a way where like teams start to be more responsible, more cognizant of like what they have done. So you start seeing people like looking at infrastructure, understanding what they are building. They are building in their own systems. They are like, I've been in customer care. Like I built my own Kubernetes cluster one day. Like I came to the conclusion that like, if I'm doing this, I'm sure others are doing this. So like how we can evolve this. And this is one of the reasons that a few years ago, I joined Developer Platform, because like I want to scale this. And this is happening not just in a single enterprise. It's happening like, I work a lot in the open source. We all solving very similar problem, depends on like the business needs and depends on each goals and unique organizations that you look into. So when you look at the end of it, it's becoming like, instead of me just having like couple solutions for like my problem, now how we evolve that into a way that it could scale to like all of the business units, all of the engineers that we work on. Like, and I mentioned earlier, like developers is our customer. It's like the entire business unit, including developers. It's like their experience, it's their like leadership experience, like what are they trying to do, like how to do it. So when you start evolving to that space, you think about like, it's not about the problem solving. It's not about the technology. It's about like the capabilities that you're delivering. It's a mix between both of them. I was just talking with Sneha earlier about this, and like you cannot go into engineering only or product only. It doesn't work this way. These are the things that like, it's a combination of thinking through. Like you can tell me a problem and I can give you a solution immediately. Would it help you? Probably in a way, but like, is that exactly what you need? I don't know. I didn't ask the questions. That's like product. Think about like, also like how this would get shaped into your experience. That's where we start like more of the conversation. So when you have like this wider like conversation about like what exactly are you trying to solve, and then let's jump into like, after you tell us, maybe you're solving for the wrong thing, or maybe there's something else that you should solve for that you're not seeing because like we didn't chat about. These are how it works. So it's, to me, I have seen it from like where it was just the vending style, like just like the infrastructure, to like teams are enabled to do their own stuff, to now it's becoming like a centralized effort on like, as Sneha mentioned, we equipped with that expertise. Like we have the SMEs for CI, the Kubernetes. We have the mindset, we have the TPMs, the product people who think about like user interviews. We have the design people who think about the user experience. And then like now we can deliver like a cohesive experience across all of it. And it's not fraction. It's not like Kubernetes cluster that in a specific cloud provider, and then like you have an identity system sitting in a different cloud provider, and then like how to map these together. Like to an engineer, like I'm responsible for that Kubernetes cloud. I'm solving my problem. It's your problem. Then like you leaving the customer stranded was like, I have two things. I don't know how to go there. So it was an evolution. It was something that we have to step into over time to see what's working for us and what's not working. And that's what we got there. And we're there now. And then we're trying to evolve from there. That's how I have seen it over time. But what about you? Like how you have seen it?
Plus. I think your question was like, how do you even get started with like building like the product, like platform product acumen?
Like, is that where it started, or like was it like, hey, we started a platform team and turns out we're just building stuff and we need to start?
Yeah. And so everything that Ahmed said is like this evolution that we've gone through. So, something he kind of glossed over was we weren't called FP. That was, if I could take any credit for that. We were originally, the mission I was hired in was called Delivery Engineering.
Interesting.
And I guess it was like about 3 or 4 years old. I joined, and perhaps it's last year. And it was very focused on back-end heavy like infrastructure and like building a shared ecosystem, as Ahmed has described, like, how do you do your CI/CD? Like, how do you deploy? How do you build? How do you test? How do you build that elasticity? How do you build monitoring? It was very much focused on like the service portfolio. Like, how do you build services? How do you launch services? How do you scale in production? And that was great. But what that was missing is that, I was hired to think about developer experiences as a product leader, and the developer experiences go beyond service portfolios, and it goes into the whole application. So that application tiering obviously includes, front-end engineers. It also includes designers, and it also includes like the full stack and integrations with the data layer and production data, and how do you work with that? And that's actually when we sort of like expanded. So that happened, I would say, last year. And it's only been 12 months, but it feels like it's been much longer because we've accomplished so much in that time. It is an evolution. It's not a day one problem. I don't think you build a platform with a product team in mind. I think you build a product team once you have the notion. It's very much like the 0 to 1 versus a 1 to 100 or 1 to 1,000 step. You hire product people and product leaders like myself when you're at that, all right, we built a thing and it's gone as far as it could have. And we want to prevent a Frankenstein situation. So now, how do we make sure that we're not just responding to like the loudest voices, but that we're taking a step back and we're thinking about the whole ecosystem, and that it's really cohesive in how we think about it, and that we roll out shared components that that build homogeneity, that everything is more predictable. Because at the end of the day, the core business of the New York Times is not infrastructure; it is serving the news for our curious audiences. And the job of a games developer and like the games mission is building these new innovative games. So we want to make infrastructure easy, accessible, and honestly less of a cognitive like
tax or overload.
Tax. And it's easier said than done. And I'm sure you've experienced that by talking to other leaders. But I think that with a platform product mindset and with the right skills in the room that complement engineering, and this is where it's like, it's a very niche space. So, the type of talent you find, you dig deep to find them. And then when you find them, you kind of hold on to them. I'm very proud of the team that I built, and I continue to build. So if you're watching this, reach out. Another thing that kind of popped out as you were talking, Ahmed, was, it's so interesting kind of watching engineers become more product oriented and product managers become more engineering focused. And this is the world we're living in. Our roles are getting transformed. And so maybe, and we were just talking about it, like things will change and we're open to it. We're a lean enterprise, so we're not a very large team. And I think there's a lot of space for that innovation and that space for like roles to morph into whatever the needs are. And I just thought I'd share that because that's kind of like what we're experiencing right now.
Yeah, there's so many nuggets in what you both shared. I think, one thing I'll call out is, in the 0 to 1 and the 1 to 100, like you described, like that 1 to 100 is where product really becomes important. And it echoes our own experience at Cortex. When we started the company, like I was the product manager and like our engineers were the product managers, and it was great. And once we realized, hey, it's becoming a platform, there's so many capabilities, we're starting to add features that maybe don't make sense. Like we should hire somebody whose sole job it is to say no, like, oh, or this is like a thing that we should not be building, or here's a pattern that we've already used and we should start to collect those things together. And so I think we saw that a very similar thing. I think a lot of product organizations see that. I think the other thing I'll call out is like, even in that 0 to 1 phase though, I think it's very important to focus on still having a product mindset, even if you don't have a product manager. Like,
Exactly.
I think that's where a lot of teams fail in that 0 to 1, because they get excited by the possibilities and they don't focus on delivering incremental value and proving that there's some value in what they're doing. And then sometimes you lose steam and you don't get to that 1 to 100 phase. And so I think we've definitely seen a lot of that. And to what you were saying earlier, like, I think why the product mindset is so important, you were talking about like the question behind the question. Like when somebody asks for something, like you want to understand the why, like what are they actually trying to do? There was a podcast episode I was listening to recently between Ben Horowitz and Brian Halligan, and it was talking about like the why salespeople and engineers don't get along together. Not that it's relevant to this conversation, but I thought the takeaway was very interesting, because engineers, like, naturally it's problem solving. And so you tell them like, hey, can you do X? And you're like, yeah, I can do X, or here's how I can do it, or no, I can't do it. It's a very simple answer. It's a problem, it's a solution. But a salesperson, if you say, can you do X? Their first question is like, why are you asking me this question? Like there's something you're trying to get out of this. And I'm going to ask you more questions to figure out why you're asking me that question. And that's what we kind of need to be doing, is like, hey, I need to scale up my Kubernetes cluster. Okay, but why? Like, are you running background workers that need to be scaled out? Like, is there something that you're trying to accomplish that maybe actually requires a totally different solution? And so like, I think that's where the product mindset comes in, which it's about asking why are you trying to solve this? Like we see this a lot with customers, and I'm sure we'll run into this later, but customers will come to us with a solution, and our job is to stay like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Like, let us go backwards and figure out the problem and then go from there. And I think that's really important. The other thing that you mentioned, we were talking about this at the dinner last night, the Brain Trust dinner, how like naming is so important, and like, naming is self-documenting, because like whatever you call yourselves, like it becomes the truth, right? Like we were talking about how teams, when they name themselves something, like if you name yourself like a payments team, if it's not related to payments, we're like, no, like that's not our team, it's somebody else. Even if there is nobody else who owns that thing, like that's who you are, and your identity gets built around it. And so was that kind of what you saw with like the delivery engineering? Like the focus was on
100%.
Delivery versus like the holistic, hey, we want to enable developers to do a thing. Like, was that the root cause there?
Yeah, 100%. It couldn't be more true in our case. Like our world opened up once we renamed ourselves, and the types of conversations we're having, like the type of conversation you just had like 2 hours ago, which we should talk about, is we wouldn't be a part of the conversation with teams that were building these capabilities that were outside of the service footprint had we not opened the doors to say, we are here to serve and enable and to build and help you scale, help us all scale. And sure, we call ourselves developer platforms, and I want to actually talk about that too, because what does that mean in a world where developers' jobs morph into product managers and developers and designers, like coming closer to each other's spaces. And I've been thinking a lot about that. So maybe there's a second podcast for that. But yes, naming matters. I wanted to just kind of share like the small anecdote. So I worked at Spotify before the New York Times. And one of the first teams that squad that I had, we called ourselves Katamari. Now, if you're familiar with the game, it's a really old game, and it's like I think it's a Nintendo's game, and it's about like rolling up a ball, and then you build like these pieces. So like if you find like a garbage can, or you find like a rubber ball, or you find a car, and you're like rolling all of these things, and the more things you roll, the more points you get. Yeah. And that was essentially what we were doing. We were rolling up user data and audience segmentation. And we're like, we don't know the forms of what these blobs and unstructured data comes in, but what we're doing is essentially rolling it up. And that visual really helped us, because then that helped us evolve the thinking and the strategy. And we made a few pivots along the way, but it goes back to a name makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I obviously have opinions around the name, and we're starting to see that. I mean, you mentioned this too, like it's not just developers anymore that's in your purview, it's like leaders, and I know like SRE and other teams kind of roll up into your organization as well. Actually, maybe let's talk about that a little bit. Like developer platform, you don't necessarily think that like DevOps and SRE and those kinds of responsibilities are part of a platform. Like why why do you guys see those things as part of your purview?
So let's talk about naming first, because naming is a problem across the industries. This is like the first things that like you could see a pull request disagreement on like how people name things.
Sorry to cut you off. One of the founding stories of Cortex, and one of the reasons why I started the company was we, at my last job, the two naming schemes we had for microservices were Game of Thrones characters and coffee. And I got paged once for, I don't even remember what it was. It was some coffee theme thing. I was like, what the hell is this? Like, what does this service do? And nobody knew anything. And you had this big argument of like, do we do like, funny names because like it makes people excited about their services, or do we do serious names that are self-documenting? And that's why I was like, a spreadsheet is not going to cut it. So that's why we started Cortex. But I agree. Naming is...
I can relate. Like we have many projects and products that we deliver, like our runtime environments called Lettercase, for example. Like we have our own naming convention of doing things differently, and this is where like you bring like fun, but also like you want to have a catalog to understand what does that mean, because sometimes these identities is like as you mentioned, like developer platform now represents something. It's so meaningful in a way, but then like you want to have like some areas where like you can name things differently, but still have source of truth of what does that mean, because like it's confusing when I tell someone like, I built this project. Oh, like sorry, what does that mean? Like explains the name in the first place if it's not coming. So your question was more about like the SRE and the
like why do all those functions, why are they part of the purview of developer platform?
So from my perspective, and this is like where it goes to the cohesive experience that like you get and try to understand from the platform. It's not like, so earlier in the days when like we were like more service oriented, like I want a CDN, get your CDN, I want this, get this. It wasn't like how to connect all of these pieces together. So it's like the problem that we are solving, it's not just like engineering or a product or a platform. It's like the whole culture space problem. It's like all of the steps that you take in an instant when an incident happens, like how to frame that, like what are the right steps to do it, like how to prevent that in the first place. It's someone has that capability and understanding in their space to do that. So that's where like an SRE team comes in. They understand like all of the things that they have done. They have the experience in SLOs. They know what it means. Sometimes you talk to an engineer and say like, how do you solve this problem? And then like, giving you an example, not in the New York Times. I was working in something, and then like, you decide as an engineer, as simple as I would use that algorithm. And the algorithm was doing like a simple concatenation on a string. But then like you talk about this when like you think about at a request level, which works, and like on 100 request level works. What about million request level? Like this is where like you want someone have that experience, have that understanding, like you check that, like do you understand, have seen these problems before, like have that availability in the scopes. You have like some sort of an SLO runbook understanding, like when an incident happened, like where to look, how to connect all of these pieces together. The familiarity with that part is so crucial into like solving this overall, because at the end of the day, part of like the platform is not just like running, is the operation overall. It's like how to operate it. Like building something is a one thing, but like operating it is another thing. It's just like how to focus on like operating something on the long term, and that doesn't degrade, because like you could build like a really good thing at earlier start, but then like you don't know how to scale it, you don't know how to operate it. It's not about the building process, it's that the operation process. That's where like you have to combine both of these practices together, so you make sure that as you build, you continue to operate efficiently in a way that this platform can scale. And that's where like you combine all of these things together. You combine the infrastructure with the product, with the SRE mindset, with like other functions in the organization to bring the whole experience overall. You bring the whole platform, as you can see, and that what delivers value at the end of the day. Because you don't want to build something, I don't want to build like a Kubernetes cluster, or I don't want to build like a CDN, or I don't want to build like a platform that doesn't mimic what the customer would see. Like they would take it and then it's not functioning. So who looks into that? Who helps them build their SLOs? This is the conversation. And like we have seen like this sort of engagement happens in a level where like, sure, I need to build a service and I have it in mind, but I don't know what this SLO gonna look like. I don't know what's a runbook look like. Usually people know, but they don't have the depth analysis into like what are the things that you should be aware of. As much as you can put in a platform, you still need to have these practices, because every service is a bit different. There's one service that like takes a request that takes like 5 seconds, which is okay from a service perspective. Holistically, that might not be okay on other services. And there's another service that takes 100 milliseconds. Like the runbooks, the scale, all of that. These are little details in operation. We call them SRE engagements. And that's where like you engage with a team to understand more in depth. So there's product, there's like engineering, there's SRE, there's like other, all of these things. There's the experience that the developer is seeing. This is how this is returns back to ROI. And this is where I could see like all of that fits in the same review to like, what are you developing at and delivering at the end of the day?
Yeah, I love that because I think it's fundamentally focused on the end users of the New York Times, because if you can bake in those practices as part of the platform, then it's easier for your developers to deliver those experiences to their end users. And like, even if you think about it from an internal experience perspective, giving somebody like a Kubernetes cluster and it's like, all right, good luck, versus here's a cluster which has like reliability practices baked in, and we're going to make it very easy for you to get the monitors and SLOs that you need, and like all those things baked in from day one, is a much better end-to-end experience, because it's not just like here you go, good luck, like it's your problem now, versus here's the end-to-end journey that you were talking about earlier. Yeah. Has that always been the case? Like back in the delivery engineering days, like where was SRE still part of it? Like how has the organization evolved?
It always was, and it was always a practice, and it still is. I think it's just evolved into thinking more full stack, thinking more of like the native experience, thinking about the web experience, thinking about the data surfaces, just how do you build an app end to end? The whole 9 yards matter, because I mean, this is the journey. Like when you're working on an SLO of a service, what you call a service has all these dependencies on these multiple services, but they turn out to be application ecosystems that have multiple data graphs and that they have multiple, client side calls. And it's like a spaghetti mess that you need to unpack. And what you realize in that journey, and what we realized in that journey, was there are multiple reasons why SLOs are hard, but we ourselves as a delivery engineering team didn't have the full picture. Mm-hmm. We didn't have visibility. We weren't in the conversation. We weren't having the right, those teams weren't within our remit. And now that they are, we have more controls. So for instance, we believe every tier 0 service should have their own SLOs at this point. But what does that mean for a platform service? What does that mean for an end user service? Obviously, a foundational platform service that is tier 0, that is that can essentially pull down the New York Times, should be treated with a higher level of availability goals. But they have so many dependencies across the board, and they're invisible at times. So how should they work together? And we're learning, we're figuring it out. We're getting much better. And we call this program that we're working on Always Ready, and it's a fun initiative, but it's so different from a consumer experience. So like a consumer just knows what the end user experience needs to be, and sure, it knows the services it depends on, but it has to know that the platforms that support those services exist and that they are ready to go. Just like how you depend on Google Cloud if you're on a GCP shop, or you depend on AWS if you're Amazon shop, or whatever vendor you choose, like you have certain thresholds. The platform infrastructure should just work and operate with that in mind. When you build your own infrastructure and when you build your own abstractions, it gets harder. And that is the responsibility that I see. That is our responsibility to fix. And cost goes hand in hand with stability. Like, how much are you willing to spend on this space? Sure, you could say, I want 5 nines. Are you willing to cut the check for it? And if you're not, then let's have that conversation. So if you don't have these functions centralized as we have it in developer platforms, there's a different kind of fragmentation that occurs where the cloud native financial operators may be sitting on one end of the spectrum, far further away from where the application development and the platform infrastructure is being created. And the SRE could be on another side, in another domain, in another spectrum, completely disconnected from like the pain and suffering of what happened. So having it centralized again, we're centralized. The New York Times, from a software engineering perspective, we're about under 1,000 engineers. So the scale at which we operate and the way that we can move is far more agile than perhaps like a 10,000, 100,000 workforce of engineers. And I'm sure they need to make those trade-offs. And I'm not here to like pitch like this is the one way, but it totally makes sense in the context of the organization we have and the context of like the work we do. And would it be nice to have more SRE engineers like embedded in every mission that's building over time? Like if we could scale this goes back to like, how do you think of DevOps?
Yeah.
Right. Like, do you hire DevOps engineers on every team? Actually, truly speaking, every engineer at this point is a DevOps engineer, and SRE is also, it is a role. And it is highly technical, and honestly, there are a few people who get it, and when they get it, you keep them, and you hone in on that. But it is also something you can teach. It's a practice that you can teach, and I think every software engineer at this point should understand the practice of site reliability. Like, this is production code that you built. You should be confident, and you should work towards asking and making sure that you have the tools, the right acumen to be able to support that. And if you don't, that's a concern. Don't launch to production till you know how to do it and that you know how to support it. So that's where we come in and we try to help.
I think it's really interesting because, like you said, if you have SRE in one place and FinOps in one place and everything, like they depend on each other. Like you said, every extra 9, there's some additional cost involved in every single 9 or whatnot. And so, having those two teams kind of at odds goes against the idea of like a holistic experience and a holistic business outcome. It's like those two things are not at odds. They're trade-offs sometimes, and so as an organization, you have to be able to like balance those things and figure out holistically, what do we want to deliver to our customers, and what does that mean at a service by service level or a product by product level. Mm-hmm. And so I think we are starting to see a pattern in the market where these functions are starting to become more cohesive rather than like separate functions. And I think that's really interesting. And I guess maybe going back to the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about like, what is the charter of developer platform? And it sounds like it's not just developers, it's not just platform, like FinOps and SRE and all these things. Like, it sounds a lot broader than just like what people might think as developer experience. Like, how do you guys describe internally to like leadership or business stakeholders? Like, what is the goal of developer platform? Like, what is it that you bring to the business?
Yeah. Can we brainstorm?
Let's do it.
I want to take a stab at it.
Yeah.
And Ahmed, I want to hear your perspective. You are right.
Yeah.
I sort of alluded to it. I feel like developer platforms helped us in many ways in terms of like the users, having a very clear user base. Every developer at the New York Times is our customer. And that is very clear, and that has helped us. But we do a lot more than that, and it's becoming
a lot more,
right? So what should we call ourselves? It is core, it is fundamental.
Yeah.
It is essentially what platform engineering really is.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about it because those are not our platforms, but there are many other platforms that operate in the ecosystem. So we have a commerce platform, and we have a publishing platform, and all of those pieces of the platform come together to serve like their purpose built.
Yeah.
Publishing is for publishers. Commerce is for our pay flow and like our subscription and our revenue generation and so many others. In our case, it's not specific. It is
organizational.
Generic. It is organizational. So there's like a technical stack here. There's an architectural pattern here. We should draw it out. But we're a horizontal.
Yeah.
And we go as wide as we need to. And we're starting to go as deep as we need to as well. And the further up we go, the more we realize that we need to lean into the vendors that we work with.
Yeah.
And build, what is differentiated value for the New York Times versus undifferentiated value. And invest in the things that differentiate us, that are unique to our core business. So I talked about video observability and like making sure that we understand the way that we serve video and what levers we want to pull. At this point, I would say that's differentiation.
Yeah.
a year from now, that's probably undifferentiated.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, they're all, we have to pave the way for what those patterns are. And then once we understand them, we can sort of like find thought partners who can lead the way.
Yeah.
And I genuinely believe that because, this is like the classic build versus buy. I've learned through my experiences, and when you build everything that you need, you sort of, the economies of scale go against you. There's only so much that you can do on your own. And then your team isn't able to scale up to the business challenges. And then at that point, you then become like, well, you become the bottleneck. We don't want to be the bottleneck. We want to be able to like move as quickly as a business needs us to. And for that, I think that's the sound way to sort of scale, grow. And honestly, I think we're just touching this is like the tip of the iceberg. We're gonna go pretty far.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned like, the commerce platform and payments platform, like the value of those things is almost easier to explain because it's like we make payments possible or we make, whatever possible. And so like how, with your organization being so broad, like what is it, like if we go to your, like the CEO of the New York Times, be like, this is what developer platform does. Like, how do you make that case? Like, hey, we need so many people on this platform team because it goes so broad. Like, what does that case look like? If you're an organization that is starting to think about building out a function like this, like how do you start making that case? Like what is your value proposition internally?
Yeah. Do you want to know?
Go for it.
Okay. I think it's a journey. I don't think you're going to get there day one. Yeah. I don't think a CEO is going to start a business, as you have probably realized, as a co-founder of a business. Like that's not the first thing that you're thinking about. Yeah. But as you scale, and as the platform grows, you probably recognize that your teams aren't moving as fast as they need to. Mm-hmm. And that's something probably the CEO cares really deeply about. Like we have lots of really cool ideas on the table and they just keep lying around in the backlog and move into an icebox that no one ever gets to. That's the hook. Mm. That's actually how you get started. It's like what is preventing you as an enterprise, I mean, in the case of the New York Times, what is preventing us from building the readership experience, those highly engaged audiences that we need? What is preventing us from getting there? Yeah. We know what they are. Yeah. And then I would ask every enterprise to, like, if they're on that journey, to think about, like, what is your ambition? Are you on track to getting there? Do you have the right practices in mind for your 5 teams, your 10 teams, your hundreds of teams? Do you know how to work together? Do you know how to work in standard operating systems? And do you have patterns that are shared and templatized, scaffolded ways for you all to work? Then great, maybe you figured it out. But for most enterprises, and that's been my experience, you hit a tipping point. At Spotify, that tipping point was actually 5,000 employees. Mm. And it's similar at the New York Times, which is why I came in, because I'm like, I know this space. I know this problem. And I think that's kind of, in my opinion, and if I ever wrote a book about it, it would be like knowing where that entry point is. And it's usually at that point where you have like about 90 to 100 engineering teams. And you're trying to figure out how to, you're noticing perhaps that you're not recovering from your production issues as well, or that, teams are just sort of like working hard, but not moving in the direction that you need them to. Like they're struggling. There's something getting in the way, and diagnosing that. It's an engineering problem, and it is a platform problem. And that's where you start sort of like championing, okay, here are the patterns, here are the things. But clearly CI/CD should be the first thing. If there was one thing you wanted to start with, I would always start with like the build, test, deploy pipeline. Like I think that is essential. It is, for me, it seems like a no-brainer. You can disagree with me. And then, what are the other pieces for application delivery? Okay, well, we've noticed that most of the production issues are that we don't know how to scale. We can't predict what those behaviors are. Then maybe at that point it's a runtime sort of investment. And okay, well, we don't actually have the right perimeter protections. We don't have a handle on like our edge, and we don't know how to operate in those. Then maybe that's like the next evolution. So I could say like it's compute networking and storage as the primitives, but every enterprise kind of has their own shape to it. So, but for me, it would be the impetus of like, what would the CEO care about? Well, I would imagine that every CEO is in the business of like making sure their business is successful and that they're monetizing on their goals, and it's cash positive. And how do you get there is by building more like lovable experiences and features and like fine tuning that and like building that virtuous cycle. And if they see any bottlenecks towards it, then I think this is kind of like the playbook for that.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's, for what it's worth, I think it's similar in every other function, right? It's like once you start scaling up the organization and you start to see the value in doing things in a repeatable way, and like, that drives efficiencies in and of itself. Like we know that in sales, like you don't want every single seller to be selling the product a slightly different way. It's like, actually, if you know something works, pretty much everyone should be doing it that way. Like it's the way to simplify and like let people focus on their job. Like you don't want developers focused on things that are like can be repeatable across the org. Like you want them to be focused on like value generating work. And I think if you start to realize that there's like this dark matter of like people are starting to do this random stuff, like, and not working on the stuff that's generating business value, like the average developer is not doing that, then it's probably like time to say, hey, actually, if we took all that stuff that people are doing, give it to a team to focus on that specifically, then we can actually free up their time as like a leverage producing activity. Is probably kind of what you're describing. I know we're coming up on time, and so maybe I'll leave this question to you because I know we were talking about AI yesterday. One of the things I think has been clear in this conversation is like we're talking a lot about like the broad horizontal like organizational meta problems of like enabling the organization, and it, to me, like we haven't talked very specifically about like developers or agents. Like it's kind of the just general practices of building and delivering software. Like that's kind of the thing we're focused on. So is it fair to say that whether it's humans or humans augmented with agents, like all the stuff we talked about is still important? Like has your strategy materially changed, or is it just evolving based off of that, or does it look still mostly the same as you're thinking about where AI fits in?
So how to say this in a nice way? I think one of the things that like I just want to say about AI in general, it's just like it's evolving, but it's another tool of the other tools that we've been looking. Like when you look at all of these practices that we have like been trying to evolve around, from runtime, from like something else, like the AI kind of ecosystem, it's not on its own. Like you still need to have all of these practices embedded. Like it enabled to doing something differently, from my opinion. Just like enable like sometimes speed, efficiency in some other areas, maybe like accuracy in some areas. Like it depends on like what are you trying to solve and like how are you using it in the organization. The way that like my personal opinion on it is just like it can enable us to do a lot of things in a way before it was still doable, but just like now might be faster, or now it changed the parameters that I have to give, because like it can do all of some of the work that like was needed to be done, but then like you don't have to share it. But it's a tool. Like we didn't reach funny is that like we were talking about AGI, we didn't reach that like run it for me in the industry overall. But like from one perspective is like, to me it's similar to like how we evolved into the internet world. It's just like it's another evolving into like how we shape that into the business, how we shape that into the experience overall. It's not replacing anything, in my opinion. It's just like giving more boost to like how we do things differently. Like I was literally talking to Sneha about this earlier. When in the 2000, like my example was like in the 2000, like before, when you look at it, any business was like on paper. You send like you want to send someone, you like call on the telephone, you do something. Like the internet wasn't there into that like ecosystem. Then it's there. There's a digital transformation. I think like where we are in now is in the AI transformation. Like we have been using machine learning for a while. What's transformative about it, from my experience, from an engineering standpoint, it's been like more generative in a way. Like I used to do in customer care, like some machine learning modeling and taxonomy and like all of the kind of stuff. You have to set and like spend the time on iterations and to develop your models the ways that you want. What's happening today is different. It's because these models come pre-trained with a lot of knowledge and information happening around the world. And more, it's becoming better and better in doing different things and different functions. So how I use that off the shelf into like my actual work. Like, let's talk about runtime. How I use that into a runtime mechanism, just making sure that it's optimized to the level that meets standard. Have an agent that to optimize for that. Can that happen? Yes, you have seen companies like around that space. In the SRE space, I could see that in a space where like tell you best practices, runs like over like your scorecards. But like it's a tool that like embeds with like your practices in place. Like what makes that human element more important, and this is something that I mentioned earlier in my conversation, the problem from an engineering standpoint we're all solving for is fairly similar, but like each organization has its unique problems that it's solving for, because like they have that business ideas, they have the goals, they have that vision of where they want to go. And that's what are you trying to solve for. So you try to find engineering solutions, product solutions, platforms that fits the goals that the enterprise or the company has. And that's where I see like AI fits into that space. It's just another evolution of like how technology is evolving around us. And we have to take that and see like where it actually makes the most sense. Is it in a migration? Is it like in SRE? Is it like in product? Is it where that? And if that capability that make more sense brings us the ROI that it makes sense to the platform, that's where we should invest more into it. But it's at this moment, it's more of like, let's try in many areas how we evolve around this and how we make that transformation into the product, into the business, into everything.
Love that. I think, a couple of things you mentioned there, a lot of things, like a lot of ideas around, it's like, it's our practices, it's our mission, it's our vision. And it doesn't matter whether it's AI or anything else. Like that's what you were saying, like it's a very broad horizontal organization, and things like a tier 0 service is a tier 0 service, whether or not AI wrote it or a human wrote it. Like if it goes down, it goes down and the site goes down. SRE practices like reliability, your customers are not going to be like, oh, the New York Times are using AI to write their code. Like I want my news, like I either get it or I don't. And it's like your customers have those expectations. And so in some ways, it sounds like the work you guys have done on the platform are going to become more and more important, because by codifying these things into your infrastructure, into your platform, and making it easier for people to build on it, actually you guys are better positioned to take advantage of AI now. Like if you have designers or product managers that want to go and build their own software, hey, like our platform is going to do all this stuff for you. And actually you don't have to think about it. Like we're maybe you're less scared of delivering that stuff to production because the platform takes care of those things for you. And so it kind of becomes a leverage point. I know we're at time. Yeah. Sneha, Ahmed, thank you both for coming on the podcast. I think one of my takeaways from this is I think you guys have a very, very, one of the most mature mindsets around platform and the product management around it, that I've had the opportunity to talk to. So I think people will have a lot to learn from this episode. So thank you both for joining me.
Thank you for saying that, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having us, and looking forward to chat with you again in Brain Trust.
We'll talk about naming on the next episode, maybe.
Yes.
Thank you both.